are tired like heavy stone, traveling, traveling, all alone. Who will see and who will care about this load that I must bear? Traveling, traveling, all alone. Prayers I send to heaven above about my burdens, woes, and love. Head bowed down with misery, nothing now appeals to me. Traveling, traveling, all alone. Give me just another day. There's one thing I want to say. Friends, the world and all its gold leave you always when you roll. Traveling, traveling all alone. All alone.
Oh, baby, daddy, take to the bar.
In a little honky-tonk honky village in Texas, there's a guy who plays the best piano by far. He can play piano any way you like it, but the kind he plays the best is A to the bar. When he jams, it's a ball. He's the daddy of them all. The people gather round when he gets on the stand. Then when he plays, he gets a hand. The rhythm he plays puts the cats in a trance. Nobody there bothers to dance. And when he jams with the bass and guitar, they holler, oh, beat me, daddy, head to the bar. A plink, a plank, a plink, plank, plink, plank, plunking on the keys. A riff, a rap, a riff, rap, riffing out with ease. And when he jams with the bass and guitar, they holler, oh, beat me, daddy, head to the bar.
Oh, beat him, Freddie, eight to the bar.
A son of bus riding off flower, through the flower. When the passengers make room, whisper bride and groom, that's us on a bus. 2 in 1 seat, love on every detour. You can be sure that I'll show you how it feels to honeymoon on wheels with 2 in 1 seat. Slow down, Route 27 is the nearest thing to heaven I know. Speed up, start hitting 60 and my heart'll jump and thump. Oh, oh, what a bump. Us on a bus, kisses intimating that we're waiting till it's time to light the lamps. Hit the tourist camps, that's us on a bus, yeah.
We're on the air, coming to you live from our little adobe home in Los Lunas, New Mexico. It's the Desert Home Companion, where we've got sunshine all day, moonshine all night, and it ain't gonna rain no more, no more.
The old man stood out in the storm, his shoes was full of feet. Well, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more, it ain't gonna rain no more. Now the world in the old folks tell, it ain't gonna rain no more. Oh, mosquito, he fly high, mosquito, he fly low. If that old mosquito ever lights on me, he ain't gonna fly no more. Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more, it ain't gonna rain no more. Old folk tell it ain't gonna rain no more. Yes, fly away, bud. The butterfly flits on the wings of gold and June bug wings of flame. The bed bug has no wings at all, but it gets there just the same. Well, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. Now the world, the old folk tell it ain't gonna rain no more. No more showers. A man laid down by the shore, and by the shore he died. Yeah. Now at the coroner's inquest, they called it suicide. Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. Now well, the old folk tell it ain't gonna rain no more. Tail in the air, and she ran right through the barn. Well, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. Now the world in the old folk tell it ain't gonna rain no more.
Welcome to the Desert Home Companion. Nice to see all the happy faces here, some new people, some old friends, and so we've got a really great show for you tonight. Tonight's episode of Desert Home Companion is brought to you by the American petroleum industry. Why go for those newfangled technologies? Go for the gas. There's no fuel like an old fuel. And by Ray's Septic Plumbing. We're #1 in the #2 business. That last one is an actual motto of Ray's Septic Plumbing. I did not make that up. We're #1 in the #2 business. We saw it right on the back of their truck. So, a few introductory things about the show tonight. We've got some really great things for you. We've got some readings, some presentations. We have some mystery musical challenges for you. And we have a storyteller with us tonight, Harriet Cole, who is going to be telling us a Swedish folk tale. And and at the end of the show, we invite everybody to stay around, and we'll visit a little bit. So when it's all over, stay around and have a chance to chat. Please stay muted during the show. It's really helpful if you've got the video It's really helpful for us to see your faces. It makes a really big difference. So go ahead and turn that video on so we can see you. There's Michael Murphy. Good to see you. Is that a question, Ariel? Nope, just waving. Hi. Hi. Nice to see all of you. And Linda Starr and Gandhi is here. And fellas are here. We don't quite know who fellas are, but they are here. And Jana's here. And Grushenka is here, who is, I think, a first-timer. Not Fossil. They're not really our sponsor. I made that up. So a couple of technical notes. If you have any technical problems, chat to Tech Linda. She'll take care of those things. And you can find out more and support our performers at cutsbooks.wordpress.com. So feel free to visit there. If you are not on our direct mailing list, if you don't get an email from me directly, email me at orders@cutsreviews.com. You'll see that at some different places throughout the show. And I'll make sure that you're on the mailing list so you find out about what's going on. As we present things during the show, you can express your appreciation. We'll take a few moments after a presentation. You can express your appreciation however you feel like it. Wave your hands or thumbs up or clap or jump up and down. At the end of the show, you'll have a chance to verbally express your appreciations and share your comments and reactions. So I think that covers all of the introductory things. If there's any technical problems, please let us know. So now, we will begin our show with a little story called Breakup. Breakup. Losing the woman you've been with for 13 years is hard, especially if you're 13 years old. Take it from me. I woke up one Saturday morning a couple weeks ago to the painful realization, and some of you have been there, that the woman I have lived with for all these years, let's call her Mom, not her real name, had changed. At first I couldn't quite put my finger on the problem. And then it struck me, as trite as it may sound, that we had simply grown apart. I mean, the early years were great. We spent nearly all our time together. She had little pet names for me. I swear to God, I remember her saying, "How's my itty-bitty gooey baby?" It's not hard to understand how that kind of thing drops by the wayside pretty quickly into a relationship. Naturally, one would expect our daily life to normalize with time, but our daily life wasn't just normal, it was empty. We were like two ships, not even bothering to pass in the night. Well, my first inclination was to blame her, but that was hardly fair. Surely I must have contributed to the coldness that had crept between us. I considered our communication. Of late, our typical conversation was something like, "How was school? Okay. How did you do on that math test you've been studying for? Okay. Did you like the liver sausage sandwich I made for you? Yeah. Did you see the Johnson girl today? No." This latter was a lie on my part. Of course I'd seen the Johnson girl. I see her every day. She has some bizarre power over my endocrine system. It's painful to even think of her, though not as painful as seeing her, so I lie. I reflected on my participation in the conversation. One couldn't claim that I was not responsive. I had responded appropriately to each question, appropriate in some situations involving lying. And yet I felt that perhaps I could have done a tad more to bridge that gap, to reach out, to go just that little bit further. As willing as I was to shoulder my share of the responsibility for making our relationship work, I had to admit reluctantly that she had become a little harsh, even bitter over the years. Sometimes she would shout things like, "I swear if I have to remind you one more time to get your dirty clothes out of the bathroom and into the hamper, you're going to be grounded for a month." Or, "Because you stink to high heaven, that's why you're going to take a shower right now." But all in all, try as my baser self would to cast the blame elsewhere, I knew in my heart that it was all up to me. As I prepared to get out of bed, I resolved to try harder to rekindle that, what can I call it? Let's say connection that seemed to have atrophied between us. When I walked into the kitchen, Mom, again, not her real name, I'm trying to protect the last vestiges of her dignity, was making pancakes. Here was the woman to whom I had given the best, albeit the only, years of my life. I took a deep breath. "So, Mom, how are you this fine morning?" She stared at me for a moment. "Fine, thank you. And you?" "Good, yeah, I'm good. So, Mom," I said, sitting down at the table and picking up the glass of fresh orange juice that she had prepared, "where do you see yourself in 10 years? When she had stopped howling with laughter, she wiped the tears from her eyes and said, "Just tell me what favor you want, okay?" My feelings were genuinely hurt. Do I have to be asking for a favor? Isn't it possible that I'm just interested in understanding more about my own mother? She wiped her hands on her apron and then removed it. "We need to talk," she said. She grabbed a bottle of gin and a bottle of vermouth out of the top cupboard, pulled 2 martini glasses out of another cupboard, poured, stirred, added an olive to each glass, and set one down in front of me and one her place. "You're going to need this," she said. And she sat down and started sipping. "I'll make this brief and merciful," she said. "I want out." My first reaction was shock, but it quickly dawned on me that I should have anticipated this. "A person can only fix so many breakfasts, make so many beds, do so much laundry," she continued. "It's not that you're a bad person," she went on. "It's just that there's nothing here for me. I hope you understand, and I wish you the best." I don't know why I said the next words that came out of my mouth. "Is there someone else?" She sighed. "You had to ask." "Okay, yes, I'm adopting a kitten. I've already made the arrangements. I'm calling it Gooey Baby." I have to tell you that stung. But I understood. We had each done the best we could. It's just time for a change. I paused for a moment and took another sip of the martini. "I want you to be happy. You deserve it," I said. She glanced at me with an expression that I can only describe as sadness. Then she drained her glass, chomped the olive, and swallowed. "Yeah, we had our moments," and she left the room. I sat there for a minute or two wondering what it would be like without her. Then I went upstairs, got my dirty clothes out of the bathroom, and put them in the hamper. It was the least I could do. Spilled water all over my scripts. Okay, I've got a soggy quiz for you here. Here's a little quiz. What were the first words spoken by Alexander Graham Bell over the telephone? Now, we asked our audience before the show, and here are some of the answers that we had. Number 1, Jerry said, Alexander Graham Bell said, "What hath God wrought?" Well, that's close, but that was actually the first telegraph message sent in Morse code. Somebody else said, Alexander Graham Bell's first words were, "You have a grand gift for silence, Watson." Well, his helper was Watson, but those words were spoken by Sherlock Holmes. Close, but not right. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Another person said his first words were, "Your call is important to us." All right, maybe. Randy said Alexander Graham Bell's first words were, "Do you have Prince Albert in a can?" And Linda said Alexander Graham Bell's first words were, "What are you wearing?" Linda will deal with that later. And finally, we have a response from Ron here from Los Angeles. He says Alexander Graham Bell's first words were, "Para español marque el número dos." Gandhi, you have some first words?
Mary had a little lamb.
Okay. Thank you. Well, his actual first words were, "Watson, come here, I need you because my sisters want to sing you a song." He had 4 lovely sisters, and we actually have the video footage from that original first telephone message. And here it is.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Give him 2 lips like roses and clover. Then tell him that his lonesome nights are over. Sandman, I'm so alone. Don't have nobody to call my own. Please turn on your magic beam. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Make him the cutest that I've ever seen. Give him the word that I'm not a rover. Then tell him that his lonesome nights are over. Sandman, I'm so alone. Don't have nobody to call my own. Please turn on your magic beam. Oh, Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream. Bum 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 bum. Mr. Sandman,
Yes?
bring us a dream. Give him a pair of eyes with a come-hither gleam. Give him a lonely heart like Pagliacci, and lots of wavy hair like Liberace. Mr. Sandman, someone to hold, would be so peachy before we're too old. So please turn on your magic beam. Mr. Sandman, bring us, please, 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 Mr. Sandman, bring us a dream.
All right. Wow. Our next piece here is a mystery piece for the evening. A mystery story. I usually wear my mystery hat, but I forgot my mystery hat today, so we'll do it without the mystery hat. This is a story called A Nicer Place. The cabbie pulled up to the number 2 spot in the airport taxi queue, and had just turned off his engine when somewhere close by brakes squealed with urgency. His driver's reflexes kicked in, and he swiveled his head to locate the source. Some guy had just come out of the terminal and stepped out into the street without watching where he was going. The cabbie took a good, hard look at the traveler. Looked like he'd slept in his clothes for a week. The unfocused look on his face could have been a sign of drinking or drugs or something else. He was heading to the taxi queue. The cabbie carefully examined the man's features, restarted his engine, and stepped out of the cab. He walked over to the cab in front of him and knocked on the window. The driver was engrossed in a magazine and waved off his right to the next customer. "Looking for a cab, pal?" The cabbie called out to the traveler, who changed direction without saying a word and approached the cab and let himself into the back seat. The cabbie got back in and buckled up. "Where to?" "I need a motel. Cheap." His voice was tight, scratchy. "And I could really use some company tonight." "Tell you what I'm going to do," the cabbie said. "I know a bar. It's in a pretty tough part of town, but you won't have any trouble finding a woman there, and they got rooms upstairs. You can even sleep there all night when you're done with, Sound okay?" "Yeah, sure." His voice trailed off like he was falling asleep in mid-sentence. "Okay, just a sec, gotta text the wife, then we're off." The cabbie poked at his phone for a few seconds and then put it on the seat next to him and pulled away from the curb, turning on his lights to cut through the darkness of the late evening. Neither man spoke. 20 minutes later, the cabbie pulled over in front of a bar. "That's it. End of the line. $18. The traveler handed him a crumpled 20 and got out without saying a word. The cabbie shook his head and drove off. Frank Perrone stood on the sidewalk for a couple minutes, alone in the dark in a city he had never been to before. The place smelled bad. Urine, garbage, staleness, fear. He pulled his collar around his neck, glanced around quickly, and ducked into the bar. It was dark, smoky. He surveyed the sparse late-night crowd. Some bikers playing pool, some small groups clinging to their tables, crying and laughing over their spilled beers. At the near end of the bar, a guy in a torn sports jacket was explaining something loudly and passionately to the bartender, who kept signaling for him to lower his voice. And to the far end of the bar was a woman. Not what he'd expected. She was young and very attractive, dressed more like a college student than a hooker. He walked over to the end of the bar and sat down on the stool next to her. "There's no other way to say this. What's a nice girl like you doing in this place? Mind if I sit here?" She laughed loudly. "Yeah, I know, right? My great uncle lives in this neighborhood. It was a beautiful place 50 years ago. We can't get him to move. I come visit him a few times a year and just get a little bored sitting around his apartment. Nobody's ever hassled me here, and the bartender's a nice guy." She took a sip from her beer. "I guess I should ask you the same question." "Oh, I'm Natalie." She held out her hand. He shook it. It was the only kind human contact he'd had in months. He glanced around quickly and then said, I'm Ed. It's a long story, a very long story." He became silent for a moment. "You know, I'd really like to tell someone that story. I'd like to tell you. I mean, if you're interested, it would mean a lot to me." Natalie looked at him for a moment. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Yeah, sure, Ed. That's nice of you." Frank stood up from his stool. "Can we go over there?" he said, pointing to a table by itself in the corner. "It's more private." She picked her beer up off the bar along with its coaster. He motioned for her to go first, and they walked over to the table. Once they had settled, Frank began. "I'm not looking for pity. Or maybe I am. It doesn't matter much now." He took a sip from his beer. "How do I look?" Natalie cleared her throat. "Well, you're a decent-looking guy. Looks like maybe you've been on the road for a while. You probably haven't slept too much, huh?" "Yeah, that's charitable of you. I have a feeling I look like crap." He took another sip. 10 years ago, I had some dealings with some pretty nasty people. Me, I'm a law-abiding guy. I wouldn't hurt other people. I did some work for people I thought were honest, ordinary folks. I was wrong. When one of their big cheeses got busted, I felt it was my duty to speak up, talk to the feds. I had some important info, and it helped put the guy away for a long time." He paused to see how Natalie was reacting. She was just watching him, listening, nothing more. They put me in witness protection. They did a good job of it. Had the old me die in a car accident. Pictures in the paper, an actual funeral. I was tempted to attend, but of course I couldn't. I mean, my old friends thought I was really gone. It was hard to think of. Did you have a family, a wife, kids? Natalie asked. No, thank God. I've had a couple nice girlfriends as the new me. I was grateful for that. Then, 2 months ago, it fell apart. Natalie moved in a little closer to the table and he leaned forward. I should have known they wouldn't stop looking for me. Geez, 9 years later, they still hadn't given up. Apparently, they found some sucker who had access to witness protection records and offered him $1 million or something. People will take huge risks for $1 million. He led them to me, and that was the last thing he ever did. Oh my God, Natalie gasped. She hadn't touched her beer in 3 minutes. It was sheer luck that I escaped their first hit attempt. Car bomb. We're going to have a party at the end of the workday with some serious liquor, so I took the bus instead of driving. Some poor guy sideswiped my car while I was at work and blew it to Kingdom Come. When I got a call from the cops, I knew what was going on. I took a cab to the airport, bought a ticket to the other side of the country. I had nothing but the clothes on my back. Yeah, it was stupid of me to use my credit card. They traced it. Maybe if I had just hitchhiked somewhere, I could have stayed hidden. Nah, probably not. They had a tight net around me. They never let me out of their sight. Eyes and ears everywhere. At first, I tried to contact witness protection or go to the police. Every time I did, someone would run me off the road or blackjack me from behind or drag me into an alley and kick me in the guts. I don't know if they've been toying with me, torturing me before they take me out, or just protecting themselves by waiting until they can make a clean kill that doesn't get one of their men sent to prison. Frank paused to take a good look at Natalie. She looked a little pale. It was nice of her not to get up and leave. Whatever they've been waiting for, they're done waiting. The last few weeks I've forced myself to stay in public places, large crowds, 24 hours a day. Not easy to do. Little chance to sleep. And I've kept on the move. When I get to a new city, it takes them a little while to find me, so I get a short break, for whatever that's worth. But I'm at the end of the line. I don't think they care anymore if they have to shoot me in the middle of a crowd. They tried it yesterday. I felt a guy come up behind me in the middle of a mall. I turned and kneed him and ran, made it to the airport. What I'm saying, Natalie, what I'm saying is that this is the last night of my life. By tomorrow, they will have found me. At least they'll put me out of this unbearable misery. But if you can find it in your heart to spend a dying man's last night with him, to comfort him with your love for his last few hours, I could die in peace. Natalie stood up. Wow, that is an amazing story. How many girls has that worked on, Ed? Frank sighed, rested his head in his hands. I shouldn't have said anything. The story's true. At least I got to tell somebody. Ed? He looked up at her. There were tears on his cheek. Natalie sat back down. Ed, I don't know what's breaking your heart. Maybe you can't tell what's real anymore, but I think you're sincere, and I want to hold you for a while. I think they have some rooms upstairs. Come on. She stood up and offered her hand. Frank took it and wiped his wet face with the back of his other hand. Upstairs, Frank surveyed the tiny room. It smelled bad, a sagging mattress barely big enough for 2 people, a rust-stained sink and a toilet with the top of the tank missing. It didn't matter. 1 lopsided wicker chair. At least it's private. No one can see us. No one can hear us. I just wish I could take you to a nicer place. Natalie reached into her purse. Yeah, Here's to a nicer place, Ed. Or should I say, Frank? She pulled out her gun and fired 3 times. So that's a little heavy there. That's a little, every once in a while I get kind of a heavy story. Get a heavy story. All right, so we're coming up to our storyteller, but before we do that, I've got a musical quiz for you. I think you're going to like this a lot. Let's go to the share screen. We got a musical quiz. So here's the deal. The other day I was listening to a song. It started out, I had no idea what the song was. And then it got to like the chorus of it, and I went, oh, that's the song. So I'm thinking, how many songs are there where you don't really recognize the song until later on? So here's a quiz, and we'll see who can do what with this. I'm going to have to jockey around between screen share and not screen share. But the first one's an easy one. I'll play you the first bit, see if you can guess, and then I'll give you the musical answer. Here's the first bit.
When I was just a little girl, I asked my mother, what will I be? Will I be pretty? Will I be rich? Here's what she said to me.
All right, there you go. So we got any guesses there? I saw something in the chat, but
Doris Day.
but what's the name of the song? What is
Que
the name of-
será, será.
Aha! Everybody agree with that? All right. So before I play you the musical answer to figure out whether you're right or not, just a little history. Of course, that song was originally a Jewish song, and hearkening back to the days of arranged marriages, where a young woman might fancy a young man in her village and hope that maybe he would be her future, but more often than not, she ended up being disappointed. So here's how the song originally went, and a little remembering here of Alan Sherman. This is not an Alan Sherman song, can't blame it on him. But so the original song was, when I was just a little girl, I asked my mother, who would I wed? I gotta remember, who would I wed? Shoot, I've been singing this a million times. Would it be Casey, son of the Roths? Here's what my mother said. Casey Roth's betrothed to Sylvia Finkelstein. So you're stuck with Gary Green. Que sera, sera. All right. So there we go. And here is the musical answer. The previous quiz.
Here's what she said to me. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be.
All right. Are you ready for musical question number 2? Here we go. Musical question number 2. What is this song? Here's the beginning.
January, February, June and July. I said January, February, June and July.
All right, there you go. Musical question. You got any answers? Randy, you know all these songs. We got a chat from Ariel with a good guess. Any other guesses? Okay, here we go. Here's the musical answer. The musical answer is
January, February, June and July. I said January, February, June and July. Shine on,
shine on harvest moon up in the sky. I ain't had no loving since January, February, June, or July.
All right, so Ariel wins the grand prize on that one. Good job, yay. All right, two more. Here's one. I think this one's going to be tough. See if anybody gets this one. The musical question is, here's the musical question. What is this song?
They asked me how I knew my true love was true. I, of course, replied, something here inside cannot be denied.
All right, guesses. We have a chat here. Oh, Ariel is smoking, shall I say? Anybody else want to guess?
Smoke gets in your eyes.
There you go. The musical answer. Here's the musical answer.
They said someday you'll find all who love are blind. When your heart's on fire, you must realize smoke gets in your eyes.
Wow, what a great song, eh? Smoke gets in your eyes. We have one more musical question. I think this is the toughest one. Let's see if anybody can get this. Here we go. The musical question is...
She was afraid to come out of the locker. She was as nervous as she could be. She was afraid to come out of the locker. She was afraid that somebody would say 2, 3, 4.
All right,
I know.
go ahead.
It's the itsy eeny weeny strump bikini.
All right. Grushenka also got that right. I don't know if anybody else got that right. How about that? All right, here's your musical answer.
She was afraid that somebody would say 2, 3, 4. Tell the people what she wore. It was an itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini that she wore for the first time today. An itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini. So in the locker she wanted to stay.
All right, I hope you enjoyed the musical quiz. So, next it's my pleasure to introduce our storyteller of the evening, Harriet Cole. There's Harriet over in the little window here. Harriet will introduce herself. She's a very experienced and talented storyteller and has an interesting Swedish folk story for us. So Harriet, looks like you're unmuted, and I am going to spotlight you for everyone.
Okay. Yeah, I found my mute button and managed. That's one of my biggest challenges with Zoom is the mute button. I got to start by saying that due to a bit of confusion during one of our conversations, you're under the impression this is a Swedish story. It's really Norwegian with a Swedish dance in it, but it doesn't really matter because when you look at the politics of Scandinavia, everybody belonged to everybody else at one time or another. So all the countries are kind of still very closely related. So that's the little story introduction. My little introduction to myself is maybe even shorter in terms of I'm a New Mexican who spent 30 years in Arizona, and I'm so happy to be back in New Mexico. But during those 30 years, I did end up a professional storyteller and a teacher of storytelling. And I've performed in venues as widely diverse as the Gila Bend Shrimp Festival. Yes, they had one in Gila Bend, and the Mojave Desert Preserve Star Party. So spent all night telling stories to astronomers. So storytelling is something you can take almost everywhere, but I'll have to admit this is the very first time I've ever been preceded by the Itsy Bitsy Yellow Polka Dot Bikini song, which I think was just a wonderful way to warm up for a story. So this is a Norwegian story. And in Norway, they call the day before Christmas Eve Little Christmas Eve. And Little Christmas Eve is a day for cooking. And Cook was cooking. And when Cook cooked, the maid ran from the kitchen to the dairy, from the dairy to the kitchen, back and forth for milk and butter and cheese and milk and buttermilk and more and more and more until finally Cook took off her apron and said, "Done." Then she picked up a very elegant china bowl, took it to the stove, filled it with porridge, put it on a platter with a silver spoon, and brought it to the maid. "Take this," she said, "to the Nisa who lives in the barn. He wants his Christmas porridge early, and you know, it just doesn't do to make a Nisa mad, because an angry Misa is not a joke." And with that, Cook left. And the maid stared at the porridge. She understood why the Nisa got special porridge. The Nisa was one of the many supernatural small people who lived in barns all over Norway. And the Nissen made it their job to take care of and protect the farmer's livestock, to protect the barn, to help with the farm around. And they did all this for an occasional bowl of milk and Christmas porridge. But that Christmas porridge in that bowl was a porridge unlike the ones that dairy maid had ever seen before. It was made of white rice, and it had milk and cream, butter and sugar and cinnamon. The porridge waiting on the stove for the maid was oatmeal with a little bit of thin blue milk poured on top of it. She looked at the white rice porridge again, and she thought, I could take just a little tiny bite of it, and the Nisa would never know. So she picked up the spoon, very carefully inserted it into the bowl and very carefully tried to lift out just the tiniest bit. Something went wrong. She smudged the cinnamon. So she licked the spoon and tried again. It didn't go any better. The smudge just got bigger. She licked the spoon, looked at it, shrugged, ate the whole bowl of porridge, and then remembered an angry Nisa is no joke. What was she going to do? She quickly went to the stove. She picked up the cracked clay bowl that held her porridge, the oatmeal. She dumped it into that fancy bowl. She put the spoon back on the tray. She ran to the barn. She set the tray down and she ran out of the barn again. She hadn't gotten very far before she heard the voice. What is this garbage? She stopped. It's porridge. It is not my porridge. I know it's not your porridge. I ate your porridge. You ate my porridge? the Nisa, who was only half her size, only half her height, dressed all in gray, with a long red cap and an extremely rumpled beard, seemed to swell himself up. And he looked at her and said, "You are going to pay for my porridge." And she said, "I can't. I don't have anything." Right. Do you like to dance? Yes, the maid liked to dance. Do you know how to dance the Swedish hambo? Don't be silly. This is Norway. How would I know a Swedish dance? I'll teach you. Come here. And she walked up to him. He put his hands on her shoulders. And as his hands touched her shoulders, she heard a strange lilting music in her head, one with a really odd rhythmic pattern. It was in three, but it was not 1, 2, 3, and it was not 1, 2, 3. It was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Very strange pattern, which the Nisa started to say out loud. And then he said, on 1, left foot, on 2, right toe, 3, come down on right foot. There you go. And he started out, and her feet were just totally tangled up. They had no idea where the beat was or where they were going until he started to chant, "My porridge you did take. You can't dance, you must fake." And he started whirling her around faster and faster and faster. And suddenly her feet did figure out what to do. And she began to whirl with him faster and faster and faster. And they went around and around and around until all the pins flew out of her braids and her braids stood straight out behind her head. And around and around and around and around they went, and his beard flew over his shoulder, and she started to giggle, and the braids came unbraided, and the hair became a cloud, and up and down they went, past all the befuddled cows and confused goats, around and around, faster and faster and faster, until a great golden light filled the entire barn, and she collapsed onto the floor. And that is where the cowmen found her the next morning, on the floor of the barn, with a smile on her face, a smile that she kept for the entire rest of her life. Now comes the little background here. This story is one of several, 10 or 12, in my newly released book called 15 Pounds of Muscle and Bounce. And just for a description of the book, and Uncomfortable Norse Tales. For the description, I'll just read you some of the things that went on the back. It's slightly odd Norse and folk and fairy tales for big kids. By that, I mean that 8, 9, 10-year-olds who are getting to the point where they're ready for something that's a little stranger than Disney. And it contains, amongst this collection is the story I just told you, and a number of others that I have evidence can make 5th grade boys say, ew. So if you have a 5th grade boy, or you are a 5th grade boy in your mind, Norse folktales. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harriet. That was a wonderful story. Hopefully at the end of the show, some people may have some questions, or you can tell them a little bit more. So we will go from that to a beautiful Swedish waltz.
Du kom till mig sen den dagen när jag lika hopplöst förälskad som den första sekunden du såg på mig, och du sa att jag var den du saknat i hela ditt liv. Som svalan skyndar till ungen i nästet, så skyndar jag till dig med en handfull förklara min längtan till dig utan ord har den talat till mig. Som en sommarvind smeker du min kind och du fyller mitt sinne, berusad i själen av välbehag. Dina kyssar förvandlar min slutna gestalt till ett skimrande vidöppet hav.
It's a lovely waltz to dance to. Let's see here. The view, okay. So, is Hamish still here? Hamish, it looks like you're still here. Give me a sign. Any kind of sign. Give me a little sign.
I'm here.
Yay! All right. We've been waiting for 6 months to do this. We've got a story called The Absence of Hamish. I suppose that I had simply taken it for granted that there would always be a Hamish. It was a deeply ingrained and unconscious belief that I had probably inherited from my parents, kind people who trusted in the goodness of everything. On some dim level, I must have assumed that even if my local Hamish disappeared, there would still be, somewhere in Scotland, a stalwart Hamish carrying on valiantly in the grand tradition. I don't have to describe to you the shock, you know it well, of waking up in the middle of the night 3 weeks ago to something that felt like a silent and yet world-shaking sonic boom. Though none of us knew it at the moment, it turned out to be the sudden, thundering absence of Hamish. I was most devastated, as you can imagine, by the loss of my own personal Hamish. I had known him since he was but a wee Hamish, you see. In fact, there is some question as to whether I had met him long ago by some chance encounter or had simply invented him out of necessity. Perhaps my obsession with my personal loss was a defense mechanism protecting me from the global absence of Hamish. In any case, I busied myself adjusting to my now greatly diminished life. I renamed my pet white rat Hamish, and I assure you that despite what some have said, I did this with utmost respect. The rat had not been responding well to Alistair anyway. It seemed to like Hamish, when I called it, it would stand up on its back legs and, this may sound unlikely, smile. Eventually, I could no longer hold at bay the overwhelming realization that we had all lost all of our Hamishes forever. My heart ached almost beyond endurance. My only consolation was to notice that we were all in this together. This was particularly clear walking down the crowded streets of the commercial district. We took comfort in each other's presence, almost forgetting what had happened. From time to time, someone would stop dead still, staring around, confused, searching the streets, the alleys, the sky above, and finally asking some kind stranger, "What was that terrible sound?" The answer was usually accompanied by a hand on the victim's shoulder. Oh dear, it was the absence of Hamish. You'll remember by and by." This was most often followed by tears on the part of both, and then a tender hug. Truck driver and old lady, police officer and teenager, homeless person and lawyer. No one knows why the Hamishes disappeared. Some say it was pesticides, just as with the bees. The pesticide manufacturers contend, of course, that they have proof that this is nonsense. Others say that the Hamishes could no longer bear to live in a world in which the environment was suffering so badly, and in which the human heart had become angry, bitter, cruel, and defensive. But who knows? According to the President of the United States and CEO of ExxonMobil, the world is in great shape, thanks to oiliness. Sounds legit, as my paper boy says. To a person in mourning, the reason isn't important. What's important is that the loss of Hamish's has softened our hearts. Was that their intention? And so we have carried on valiantly in the grand tradition. Last Monday, the media reported that spaceships had landed around the world. Pouring forth from the ships were millions of white rats dressed in Star Trek-like uniforms and kilts. So far, they've been friendly. They like to lick people's fingers, which they do quite gently. They are helpful as well. They've solved world hunger by providing families with a machine from which we can get any food we want simply by pressing a lever. True, there is an occasional mild shock, but it's easily ignored. There is another small but significant service they provide. If someone begins speaking harshly to another person or begins to act belligerently, they are very likely to experience a sudden, tiny, but effective nip on the ankle. Talking now to my own little rat, I speculate that the thundering absence of Hamish may well have been heard throughout the universe and been answered by some benevolent civilization. Perhaps the Hamishes sacrificed themselves for us. My rat is standing on his hind legs and smiling broadly. He's holding his arms out. I think he wants a hug. So as we move toward the end of the show here, I want to share a... Jerry, wake up. Jerry, wake up. When's the last time your television said that to you? It's my brother. So Hamish is still here with us, although he doesn't have a video. So thank you, Hamish, for the inspiration and for being Hamish all these years. This is a song, my granddaughter, when she was maybe 10-ish or so, we would sit at the piano and I had a song I was playing and she was trying to play with me. We were working on it together and she said, "That's the end of Nemo's song." Well, it certainly is the end of Nemo's song, and some of you, if you have children or grandchildren who watch that, will recognize this lovely song. It's the end of Nemo's song, but it's so much more.
Somewhere beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me, my lover stands on golden sands and watches the ships that go sailing. Somewhere beyond the sea, she's there watching for me. If I could fly like birds on high, then straight to her arms I'll go sailing.
La mer qu'on va danser le long des galets clairs a des reflets d'argent. La mer, des reflets changeants sous la pluie. La mer au ciel d'été confond ses blancs tons avec les anges si purs. La mer, bergère d'azur infini. Voyez près des étangs ces longs roseaux mouillés. Voyez ces oiseaux blancs laissé maison rouillée. La mer les a versés le long des golfes clairs. Et d'une chanson d'amour, la mer a versé mon cœur pour la vie. Voyez, près des étangs, ces lents roseaux mouillés. Voyez, ces oiseaux blancs et ces maisons rouillées. La mer les a versés le long des golfes clairs. Et d'une chanson d'amour, la mer a versé mon cœur pour la vie. Pour la vie.
That ought to bring a smile to your face. Wow. So we had a few more things for the show, but we're running out of time. And so I want to thank you all for coming. We will wrap up with our final music piece here and closing credits. Our thanks to Harriet for her wonderful story. Our thanks to all of you for showing up to listen. And once the credits are over and the final music is done, please stick around so we can enjoy each other's company, say hi, ask some questions, and visit a little bit. So, the closing credits.
Lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop. Boom, 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 boom. Lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, my baby lollipop, tell you why. Sweeter than an apple pie. And when he does the shaky rockin' dance, then I haven't got a chance. I call him lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop. Sweeter than candy on a stick, up for a cereal lock on. If you had a choice, be or dip, put lollipop in my eyes. Lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop. Boom, 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 boom. Crazy way it thrills me, tell you why. It's like the lightning from the sky. He loves to kiss me till I can't see straight. Sweet, my lollipop is great. I call him lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop, lollipop, oh, lolly, 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 lollipop. Boom, boom, boom.